All right, folks. So today, in fact, we're actually going to be talking about tourism. And in terms of this whole big concept of it all, we must bear in mind that there are, in fact, certain concepts that we must consider. These concepts will revolve around four major components. First and foremost, what is tourism? Secondly, we'll be highlighting the general types of tourism. And or thirdly, the benefits of tourism to any given nation. And last but not least, we'll be highlighting also some of the effects associated with tourism, referring specifically to both positive as well as negative effects. Now, by definition, right, by definition, tourism is in fact a tertiary economic activity. Now, when we say tertiary economic activity, we are in fact referring to the fact that it is service oriented. And most importantly, also, we must bear in mind it involves the movement of people from one geographical area to another, right? And this is not on a permanent basis. This is not over a long term period. This is, in fact, over a temporary basis, mainly for the purpose of enjoyment, relaxation, leisure, recreation, even pleasure. All right. There is a big difference between tourism and migration. Migration is, in fact, over a movement from one location to another over a prolonged period of time. But tourism is, in fact, the movement of persons or people from one area to another temporarily. Right. And it is, in fact, for the purpose of enjoyment, as indicated earlier. Now, in this video, I'd like to focus upon five major or five general types of tourism. We have domestic, regional, international, ecotourism, as well as cultural tourism. Now, there are many more. However, these are the five major ones we'd like to be talking about today. All right, first and foremost, let us be talking about domestic tourism. And as you can see on the screen here, we are looking largely at a particular area in Canada here. Canada is, in fact, a very large country. As a matter of fact, there are multiple provinces in Canada. For example, domestic tourism can be associated with the movement of people from Saskatchewan all the way down to Ontario. These are, in fact, different provinces of Canada. And what is domestic tourism? Domestic tourism is associated with the temporary movement of people, right, within the confines of the country. Canada is a relatively large country, and there are, in fact, different provinces where people might simply move temporarily from one area to a next. All right, so we are going to talk about regional tourism here. And the term regional tourism is associated with the movement of people temporarily, of course, from one country to another. However, these countries are in relatively close proximity to each other. All right. I use the word here relatively. Okay, from this particular screen here, we can simply see some of the Caribbean islands. We are seeing the Cayman Islands, Cuba, the Bahamas, Jamaica, Hispaniola, San Juan, which is, I'm sorry, Puerto Rico, all right, all the way down till the most southerly Caribbean island, which is Trinidad and Tobago, all right. If I were to say I'm moving from Trinidad and I'm going to for vacation per se in Cuba, all right, all of these countries, as a matter of fact, these two countries in particular, they are in relatively close proximity to each other because they are encapsulated within the Caribbean region. All right. Now, international tourism is in fact something which extends far beyond, all right, regional tourism. International tourism is in fact associated with the movement of people on a temporary basis, obviously for the perks as we mentioned earlier, crossing a very distinctive geographical boundary from one distant location or one distant geographical area to another, extending beyond geographical range, where these specific countries may in fact have significant differences when it comes to governance. For example, if you look at the screen here, if I were to say I'm at Venezuela, right, and I'm simply moving from Venezuela all the way across to Saudi Arabia, right? That is in fact a very distinctive boundary that has to be overcome, right? And that boundary is obviously with respect to distance. We have to cross the Atlantic Ocean in an attempt to reach that particular area. All right, so we are seeing these particular areas like two completely different areas, which is more on a very international, or I should say, a very global scale. Or if I were to say, for example, I'm leaving a country like particular Azerbaijan, right? Azerbaijan, which is here, and I'm simply going all the way down across the world, all right? Let us choose a country somewhere on this side, to Taiwan, right? Or perhaps to Papua New Guinea, or even to Australia. Look at that feat. Look at that distance that actually has to be covered. So that is exactly what entails international tourism. All right, folks. So today, right now, we are going to talk about ecotourism. And what is ecotourism? Ecotourism involves the movement of people from one area to the next, in an attempt to embrace, who enjoy the serene nature, the landscape, the forest structure, the biota, referring to both plants and animals, the organisms which may exist. Right. Look at the actual slope and the topography, the flowers and whatnot. Not every single area would have a difference, right, when it comes to landscape, even the organisms which will exist, it would not be the same. Right? Every country would differ at some point, and we must bear in mind people travel right far and wide in an attempt to embrace the differences in topography, the splendor of the natural environment. As you can see we are here observing a waterfall or fluvial movements along a rocky landscape, coupled with the vegetation and stuff like that. Many people prefer videography and photography. And they also use this in the purpose of research as well, because some people are very keen with respect to documenting certain organisms which may exist in the environment. All right, we must also take into consideration both plants and animals can potentially be endemic, meaning that they can sometimes be found in a specific country or a specific region and nowhere else in the world. Hence the reason why there is so much glamour associated with, there is so much piqued interest with respect to this. All right. Differences in topography is in fact something which is very unique as well, because the differences in topography would in fact be associated with differences in terms of the vegetative cover and also the biota, referring to animal life as well. All right. For example, this looks like a volcanic peak. In different parts of the world, for example, this image here is taken from Iceland, where people simply gather around. All right, looking at the most serene yet very memorable view, right, of this particular volcanic eruption, which simply occurs in and around that particular landscape, which is very unique because not everywhere in the world there are in fact volcanoes. Now, speaking of which, let's go back into the Caribbean. This is in fact an image taken from Dominica. All right, this is where the sulfur spring, or I should say the sulfur pool, exists in Dominica, which is in fact volcanic ash, right, in close proximity to the watercourses, which can be used as a bathing environment where people simply travel far and wide in an attempt to enjoy, right, this very unique characteristic. I mean, look at this mesmerizing view, right, of this particular area. Look at the color of the water, right? The forest in close proximity to this beautiful watercourse here is actually very, very unique, as a matter of fact. Now, beaches are in fact very unique. Many people usually travel far and wide to enjoy the sun, sand, and sea, especially in tropical environments. For example, this is Englishman's Bay in Tobago, which is in fact one of the most distinctive, all right, beaches in the Caribbean, specifically referring to Tobago. Even below the waves, right, they are in fact a lot of splendor below the oceans. We can see there are in fact coral reef structures here. And many persons, many marine or aquatic enthusiasts may simply love to go on video or record or perhaps document these things. For example, this particular scuba diver here is in fact recording his dive. All right. Now, cultural tourism is closely aligned to the festivities, amongst many other things, which would exist from one country to another. It would vary depending upon the cultural approach and the culture and the historical background of these particular countries. For example, in the Caribbean, Carnival is in fact a very big festival which simply attracts a lot of persons worldwide, where many people love to adorn themselves in beautiful costumes, and many will also love to savor the moment. All right. As a matter of fact, it is all basically in the name of fun and memories and stuff like that. Let us talk about the contribution or the importance of tourism, right, to any given country. As a matter of fact, we should bear in mind it is a major revenue earner. All right, to be specific, it adds to the GDP of any given country. And when we say GDP, we're referring to the gross domestic product. But we must bear in mind, money is in fact not only circulated on a very national level, but it can also aim in terms of providing a benefit to those small merchants or small salesmen and vendors and stuff like that. Many persons like vendors and salesmen and stuff like that will simply maximize upon this time to simply sell their produce. All right. For example, the coconut vendors and whatnot will utilize this opportunity to sell their goods, right, technically to persons, tourists who gravitate towards these things. Now, food is in fact a very symbolic thing, right? Food will vary from place to place, and as a matter of fact, it is a major attraction to many. In many instances, we must understand, for example, in the Caribbean and the tropics and different parts of the world, there are different delicacies, right, which can simply be enjoyed. As you can see in this image, this particular image here, we have seen some tourists here enjoying themselves to some hot doubles, which is considered to be one of our local, highly recognized foods in the world, right? In Trinidad, that is specifically, right? Very tasty, very delicious. This is actually what we call doubles. All right. Now, I personally won't lie, I love doubles. This is actually one of my favorites as well. But I just want to let you all know, doubles is not doubles without heavy pepper, right? Many small businessmen would simply decide to sell their crafts, their art, right, to the general public. Many tourists will simply move towards this direction primarily because this is something very symbolic. This is like basically associated with souvenirs that is closely aligned to the culture of the country. For example, is very symbolic. Why? Because we can see, for instance, in Trinidad and Tobago, as you can see in the T-shirt here, and on the keychains. All right, it is something you can simply see. You are seeing the colors of the national island, the island, sorry, the national colors. That is. You are also seeing the steel pan, which is in fact our national instrument, which is originated from Trinidad itself. And it is also adorned in keychains as well, even on the trees, as you can see here, the coconut trees, that is. Now, folks, these symbolic icons, right, would vary from place to place because the culture will be different. They will have differences in infrastructural development, differences in unique monuments and stuff like that, that they will simply showcase to the world. And we must bear in mind, this will simply highlight or give recognition to any given country, which will simply promote this form of advertisement with respect to the actual island itself or the country of interest. The hospitality and the services, that sector, right, will simply be benefiting a lot from the influx of tourists in any given country. And this would actually range from the tour operators who can simply provide some historical view or historical insight in terms of the country and any given area that may simply pique the interest of the tourists. Even the transportation sector would benefit. They are actively involved, right, in tourism as well. Why? Because no tourist will simply come in any given area, as a matter of fact, and sit still. As a matter of fact, if I am visiting another country, I will be so motivated to move throughout the entire area to maximize upon my time. You don't even have time to sleep, right? You simply want to go and explore basically everything because you have limited time. As we indicated earlier, it is in fact a temporary move from one country to the next. We also have many chefs and many cooks, waitresses, waiters, and whatnot benefiting from the influx of tourists or visitors in the country. And many of them are in fact highly associated with hotels and resorts and whatnot. For instance, we have Tropicus Hotel and Beach Resort, which is a very, very pristine environment, very unique environment in Tobago, which harbors a lot of guests, and many of them usually identify this particular area with very significant reviews, great reviews to be specific. Now, we can also talk about the effects of tourism. And when we talk about the effects of tourism, we can categorize them into positive as well as negative effects of tourism. The positive effects were mentioned earlier when we spoke about the importance of tourism. With respect to the negative effects, there can in fact be significant risks. And when I'm talking about risk, there is in fact a very important thing that we must consider. There is an off-season and an on-season associated with tourist influx. The off-season is associated with a very low tourist influx in any given area or any given nation. And this is important because there will be limited amount of persons entering the country. For hotels and resorts and stuff like that, they will still have to be faced with a maintenance cost because in terms of upkeeping the facilities and whatnot for in preparation for the on-season, maintenance costs can in fact be very high in some instances. Many contractual workers are often faced with limited earnings, especially during the off-season. And this is a major problem because many of them simply have to tighten their belts because of economic restrictions, because of low payments during this period of time, which can also have a psychological component, a psychological effect. Now, infrastructural expansion is also a major thing to facilitate, right, the influx of tourists and visitors, which is potentially expanding in developing countries, as a matter of fact. This can result in areas to be deforested and subjected to major disturbance to make way for hotels, resorts, and whatnot. Last but not least, I'd like to make mention of the fact that our presence can simply disturb animals from their natural habitat. All right, referring to animals in terms of their mating and also their hunting and their overall range. So our presence can in fact be associated with significant disturbance. Alright folks, keep it. Bye bye.